The alarm system screamed across the Imperial monitoring station near Prime. Technicians stared at his display screen with confusion growing in his multiple eyes. Something massive had just appeared on the edge of their sensor range. The signature was unlike anything in the database that stored information about 3,000 years of galactic traffic. "Contact Admiral immediately," said to his assistant. His clawed hands moved quickly across the control panel, trying to get better readings on the unknown vessel. The shape was wrong. The energy output was wrong. Everything about this ship violated what the Empire knew about starship design. Admiral arrived at the command center within minutes. He was a decorated officer who had spent 40 years enforcing Imperial law across the frontier sectors. His scales were marked with battle scars, and his reputation was built on swift, decisive action against anyone who dared challenge the Empire's authority. "Show me," commanded. The main display lit up with the sensor data. A single vessel, approximately 2 kilometers in length, moving at sublight speeds through restricted space. Its hull reflected scanner beams in unusual patterns, suggesting armor composition unknown to Imperial science. "Have they responded to our identification requests?" asked. "Negative, Admiral. They appear to be ignoring all standard hailing frequencies," replied. His expression hardened. In 3, the Empire had never encountered a species that didn't immediately recognize their authority. Every intelligent race in this spiral arm either paid tribute or had been destroyed as examples to others. "Deploy Interdiction Fleet Gamma, 12 warships, standard destruction protocol," ordered. "If they won't identify themselves, we'll examine their wreckage." The Imperial fleet launched within the hour. 12 warships, each one capable of glassing a planet's surface, moved into intercept positions. Their plasma cannons charged. Their missile bays opened. They had destroyed hundreds of ships over the years. This would be no different. Inside the unknown vessel, Commander stood on the bridge of the Terran Defense Force battleship Indomitable Will. He was a calm man, 43 years old, with the kind of steady presence that made crews feel confident even in dangerous situations. He had served in the TDF for 22 years, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into deep space. "Lieutenant, report," said calmly. The young tactical officer looked up from his station. At 26, was one of the youngest officers ever assigned to a battleship. His quick thinking and ability to process combat data had earned him the position despite his age. 12 vessels approaching on intercept vectors, Commander. Their weapons are charging. Energy signatures suggest plasma-based systems and chemical propulsion missiles," reported. "They haven't responded to any of our diplomatic hails." "Continue broadcasting on all frequencies," ordered. "We came here to open trade relations, not to fight. Make that clear." Engineer spoke up from her station near the back of the bridge. She was responsible for the ship's power systems and shield generators. "Commander, if those ships open fire, our shields can handle their weapons, but it would be better if we could avoid conflict entirely." Nodded, was right. Humanity had only recently begun exploring this region of space. The Terran Federation had encountered minor alien species before, but nothing like the vast empire their long-range scouts had detected in this sector. Starting a war would be the worst possible outcome. "Helm, reduce speed by half. Show them we're not being aggressive," commanded. The Indomitable Will slowed, drifting through space as the Imperial fleet closed in. On the alien warships, targeting computers locked onto the human battleship. Admiral watched from his flagship, confident that this unknown vessel would be debris within minutes. "All ships fire at will," transmitted. The Imperial fleet unleashed destruction. Plasma bolts bright enough to blind unprotected eyes streaked through the void. Missiles accelerated toward their target, each one carrying enough explosive power to vaporize a city. The combined firepower could have destroyed a small moon. The bridge of the Indomitable Will lit up with warning alerts. "Incoming fire!" shouted. The plasma bolts struck first. They hit the battleship's deflector shields with tremendous force, creating brilliant flashes of light as energy dissipated across the protective barrier. The missiles followed, detonating against the shields in rapid succession. For several seconds, space around the human ship was nothing but light and explosions. The Imperial crews watched their sensors, waiting for the confirmation that the target had been destroyed. But when the light faded, the Indomitable Will remained. Its shields flickered but held steady. Not a single weapon had penetrated the defensive barrier. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral felt something he had not experienced in decades: fear. Commander's expression had changed. The calm diplomatic officer was gone, replaced by the combat veteran who had fought in 3 border wars before humanity had even discovered faster-than-light travel. "They fired first," said quietly. "Lieutenant, target their weapons systems only. I want them disabled, not destroyed. Maybe they'll listen to reason after that." "Yes, Commander," replied, his fingers moving across his control panel with practiced precision. The Indomitable Will returned fire. The battleship's rail guns were humanity's answer to space combat. They used electromagnetic acceleration to fire solid metal slugs at incredible velocities. When a projectile hits a target at a significant fraction of light speed, no amount of armor can stop it. The first Imperial warship took 3 rail gun rounds through its center mass. The slugs passed completely through the vessel, leaving holes large enough to fly a shuttle through. The ship broke apart in silence, its atmosphere venting into space. Point defense lasers lit up next, tracking and destroying incoming missiles with perfect accuracy. The computer systems aboard the human battleship could calculate trajectories faster than any biological brain. The second Imperial ship tried to evade, but human targeting computers predicted the maneuver. More rail gun fire, more catastrophic damage. Admiral watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. Ships that had terrorized entire star systems were being torn apart like paper. In all his years of service, he had never seen weapons like these. "All ships retreat," finally transmitted, but it was too late for most of his fleet. 17 minutes after the battle began, 11 Imperial warships were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. Only his flagship remained, and that was because Commander had ordered his weapons officers to let one ship escape. "Hail them again," ordered. This time, the Imperial ship accepted the communication. Admiral's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mixture of shock and rage. "I am commander of the Terran Defense Force," the human said calmly. "We came to this region seeking peaceful contact and trade. Your ships fired on us without provocation or warning. We responded only to defend ourselves. Take this message to your leaders. Humanity seeks peace, but we will not be attacked without consequence." The transmission ended. Ship turned and accelerated away, its engines pushed to maximum as it fled toward Imperial space. On the bridge of the Indomitable Will, the crew remained at their stations, but the tension was visible on every face. They had come as explorers and diplomats. Instead, they had just made first contact with an alien empire by destroying most of their fleet. "Send a full report to Fleet Admiral," ordered. "Tell him we need diplomatic support immediately. We may have just started a war." Engineer looked at her commander with concern. "Do you think they'll listen to reason after this?" Stared at the debris field on his display screen. 11 ships destroyed. Hundreds, maybe thousands of alien lives ended, all because someone had been too proud to answer a simple hailing frequency. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we're about to find out if this galaxy has room for humanity." The Imperial Senate chamber on the capital world of was in chaos. Senators from hundreds of species shouted over each other while holographic displays showed the battle footage repeatedly. Emperor IV sat on his throne, watching the same 17 minutes of combat for the 20th time. Each viewing made the situation seem more impossible. Spymaster stood before the Emperor, his insect-like body perfectly still despite the noise around him. He had served the Empire for 60 years, uncovering secrets and eliminating threats before they could grow dangerous. Now he faced the greatest intelligence failure in Imperial history. "We know nothing about them," admitted, his voice clicking through his translator device. "The species calls itself human. The ship that destroyed our fleet is named Indomitable Will. Beyond that, we have no data about their home worlds, their population, or their military capacity." Emperor leaned forward. "How is that possible? Your network has agents in every sector. How did an entire spacefaring civilization escape our notice?" "They came from beyond the frontier regions, Imperial Majesty. From areas we assumed were empty space or home only to primitive life. They must have developed faster-than-light travel recently and are now exploring outward," explained. Warlord rose from his seat. He was a massive reptilian creature who commanded 7 battle fleets. His family had served the Empire's military for generations, and he saw the current situation as both a threat and an opportunity. "The solution is simple," growled. "We assemble our full military might and crush these humans before they can establish themselves in our territory. Show them what happens when someone challenges the Empire." Senator stood to respond. She was from one of the older subject species, a race that had been paying tribute to the Empire for over 1,000 years. Unlike many in the chamber, she had actually read the battle reports carefully. "Warlord, did you watch the same footage we all saw?" asked calmly. "A single human ship destroyed 11 of our warships in 17 minutes. They didn't even use their full capabilities. Their commander deliberately let Admiral escape to deliver a message. That doesn't suggest weakness. That suggests confidence." The Senate chamber erupted in arguments again. Half the senators demanded immediate war. The other half urged caution and investigation. Emperor raised his hand for silence. "Spymaster, you will find out everything about these humans. Use whatever resources necessary. I want to know if we're facing a single powerful ship or an entire military that could threaten the Empire," the Emperor commanded. "Until we have that information, no aggressive actions will be taken." Slammed his fist on his desk but said nothing. The Emperor had spoken. Meanwhile, billions of kilometers away, Commander walked through the corridors of the Indomitable Will toward the medical bay. The ship had taken minor damage during the battle, nothing serious, but he wanted to check on his crew's condition. Doctor was treating a technician who had burned his hand on an overloaded console during the weapon's discharge. She was 34 years old and had served on the battleship since its launch 3 years ago. Her medical skills were exceptional, but what made her truly valuable was her ability to keep the crew calm during stressful situations. "How are we doing, Doctor?" asked. "2 minor injuries, nothing serious. The crew is more shaken psychologically than physically," reported. She finished bandaging the technician's hand and sent him back to duty. "Commander, can I speak freely?" "Always." "The crew is worried. We came out here to make peaceful contact, and instead we killed hundreds of aliens in our first encounter. Some of the younger officers are questioning whether we did the right thing," said quietly. Understood her concern. He had the same doubts himself. "We were fired upon without warning. Every defensive action we took was justified under both Terran law and basic military doctrine. But you're right that it's not the first contact we hoped for." Before could respond, Lieutenant's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Commander, to the bridge immediately. We have a situation." Arrived at the bridge within seconds. Pointed at his sensor display, where a small alien vessel was approaching slowly with all weapons powered down. "It's a merchant ship, Commander. They're broadcasting on civilian frequencies, requesting permission to come aboard, explained. This was unexpected. Had assumed the entire region would avoid the human battleship after news of the battle spread. Instead, someone was actively seeking contact. Scan them for weapons or explosives. If they're clean, allow them to dock in Shuttle Bay 3, ordered. 30 minutes later, stood in the shuttle bay as the alien merchant ship docked. The airlock opened, and a reptilian creature emerged. He was about 2 meters tall with green scales and large golden eyes. His body language suggested nervousness. Engineer had joined in the shuttle bay, curious about their visitor. She activated her translation device as the alien approached. "I am merchant captain of the trade vessel Drifting Prophet," the alien said through the translator. "I come seeking alliance with the humans who destroyed the Imperial fleet." Exchanged a glance with, "This was unexpected. Why would you seek alliance with us? We just arrived in this region." His expression was difficult for humans to read, but his voice carried emotion that the translator rendered as desperate hope. "Because in 3,000 years, no one has ever stood up to the Empire and survived. My people, have paid tribute to the Empire for 15 generations. We've watched our resources taken, our children conscripted into their military, our culture slowly erased. Then you arrived, and in 17 minutes you did what we've dreamed of for centuries. Stepped forward. We didn't come here to start a revolution. We're explorers, not liberators." "But you are here," replied, "and your presence changes everything. Word of the battle is already spreading through the trade networks. Every subject species is watching to see what happens next. If the Empire destroys you, everything goes back to how it was. But if you survive, if you establish a permanent presence here, hope becomes real for the first time in living memory." Considered this carefully. The situation was becoming more complicated than a simple military engagement. Political forces were moving, and humanity was at the center whether they wanted to be or not. "What exactly are you offering?" asked. "Intelligence, navigation data for this entire sector, information about Imperial fleet positions, supply routes, and political divisions within their government. In exchange, I ask only that you consider protecting my people when the Empire inevitably tries to punish us for this contact," explained. Over the next several hours, provided more information than Imperial intelligence had gathered in weeks. He showed them star charts marking every Imperial military installation within 50 light years. He explained the tribute system and how it kept hundreds of species in economic servitude. He described the political factions within the Imperial government and how different senators viewed the human arrival. Spent most of that time with asking questions about his culture and people. She had always been fascinated by alien life, and despite the circumstances, she found herself genuinely interested in stories about history and traditions. "My daughter is studying engineering on our home world," mentioned while describing his family. "She dreams of building ships that could travel between stars without relying on Imperial permission. Maybe someday she can visit Earth," suggested. "We have universities that would welcome alien students." The idea seemed to move deeply. A studying on the human home world. My ancestors would have thought such a thing impossible. Meanwhile, far away on, Spymaster was getting his first real intelligence about humanity. His agents had managed to infiltrate a human trade outpost on the frontier and copy data from their computer systems. What he discovered made his blood run cold. Humanity wasn't a single world with one powerful warship. They were a federation spanning 47 star systems. Their industrial base could produce hundreds of ships like the Indomitable Will. Their population numbered in the billions. And most terrifying of all, their history was filled with wars against themselves that had developed military technology far beyond what the Empire possessed. Brought this information directly to Emperor. The Emperor read the reports in silence, his face growing more concerned with each page. "They fight wars among themselves?" asked. According to the historical records we recovered, yes. For centuries, different human nations fought each other using increasingly advanced weapons. Their current peaceful federation is relatively new, only established after they nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons, explained. And now they've turned their military expertise outward, the Emperor concluded. Yes, Imperial Majesty. The ship that destroyed Admiral's fleet is not their most powerful vessel. It's just their standard exploration battleship. They have larger warships designed specifically for fleet combat. Emperor dismissed and sat alone in his throne room, thinking. The Empire had existed for 3,000 years by being the strongest military power in their region of space. Now they faced someone potentially stronger, someone whose entire civilization had been forged in conflict. The Senate would vote soon on whether to authorize war. Looking at the intelligence reports, wasn't sure which outcome would be worse. Fighting humans and losing, or avoiding conflict and admitting the Empire, was no longer the dominant power in this sector. On the indomitable will, Commander received a message from Fleet Admiral. The Terran Defense Force was sending reinforcements. 7 more battleships and a carrier group were already in transit, along with ambassador to handle diplomatic negotiations. "It seems we're staying," said to his bridge crew. Lieutenant looked up from his station. "Do you think they'll attack us again, Commander?" Thought about everything had told them, about the political situation within the Empire and the hundreds of species watching to see what happened next. "I think we're about to find out if this galaxy is big enough for both the Empire and the Terran Federation," replied. "And I think the answer to that question will change everything." Vice Admiral stood on the bridge of the carrier Horizon's Edge and watched her fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel. 7 battleships, 3 carriers, 12 destroyers, and 8 support vessels materialized in Imperial space like ghosts becoming solid. The largest human military force ever assembled outside of Terran Federation territory now floated in what the Empire considered their sovereign region. She was 51 years old, a veteran of the Mars Rebellion and the Outer Colony Wars. Her silver hair was cut short in military fashion, and her calm demeanor hid decades of combat experience. Admiral had chosen her specifically for this mission because she understood that wars were won not just through firepower but through discipline and strategic thinking. "Open a channel on all frequencies," ordered. "Let's make sure everyone in this sector hears what we have to say." The communication officer nodded and activated the broadcast. His message would be received by every ship, station, and colony within 30 light years. "This is Vice Admiral of the Terran Defense Force. We come in peace, seeking diplomatic relations and trade partnerships with all intelligent species. However, we will defend our vessels and protect any species that requests our aid from aggression. Our principles are not negotiable. Our commitment to these principles is absolute." It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't a threat. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered in a calm voice that somehow made it more powerful than any amount of aggressive posturing. On the indomitable will, Commander watched the rest of the fleet arrive with relief. He had spent 2 weeks alone in Imperial space, never knowing if another attack might come. Now he had support, and more importantly, he had someone else to handle the political complications that kept multiplying around him. "Permission to come aboard the Horizon's Edge," transmitted. "Granted, Commander. We have much to discuss," replied. They met in the carrier's conference room. Joining them were Ambassador, a diplomatic specialist who looked uncomfortable in the military environment, and the merchant who had become humanity's unofficial guide to imperial politics. "The situation is more complex than we initially understood," began, summarizing everything he had learned over the past weeks. "The Empire is massive, but it's not unified. There are political factions fighting for control, subject species waiting to see if we represent real change, and military commanders who see us as an existential threat. Ambassador adjusted his glasses and studied the star charts had provided. The question is what we do next. We can't simply leave after destroying their fleet. That would make us look like raiders. But we also can't stay without some kind of formal diplomatic framework. The Empire won't negotiate, interjected. They've never needed to negotiate with anyone. Their entire system is based on dominance and tribute. Listen to all of this carefully. Then we establish facts on the ground. We offer protection to any species that requests it. We set up trade outposts. We make it clear that we're not going anywhere. That will provoke a military response, warned. I'm counting on it, replied. But this time when they attack, it won't be a misunderstanding. It will be a choice, and we'll respond accordingly. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent alert. Long-range sensors had detected a massive Imperial fleet approaching. 300 warships, the largest military force the Empire had assembled in generations. Fleet Marshal commanded the Imperial Armada from his dreadnought Eternal Dominion. He was 70 years old, a legendary military leader who had conquered 12 star systems during his career. He had studied the footage of the first battle repeatedly, analyzing human tactics and weapon systems. He believed he understood how to defeat them. They rely on long-range weapons and fast computers, explained to his senior officers. We counter this by overwhelming their targeting systems with sheer numbers. They can't shoot what they can't process fast enough. His strategy was sound based on everything the Empire knew about warfare. What didn't understand was that human military doctrine had been developed through centuries of fighting other humans who also had fast computers and long-range weapons. The two fleets met in the space near Prime, the same region where the first battle had occurred. Vice Admiral positioned her forces carefully, using the carrier groups as mobile command centers while battleships formed defensive screens. Remember, we're not trying to destroy them, transmitted to all human ships. We're showing them that attacking us is pointless. Disable where possible. Destroy only when necessary. Lieutenant sat at his tactical station aboard the Indomitable Will, now fully repaired from the minor damage it had sustained weeks ago. His hands moved across his controls as he processed incoming data. The Imperial fleet was enormous, but they were using predictable formation patterns. Commander, I'm seeing a weakness in their approach vector, reported. If we concentrate fire on their left flank, we can force them to bunch up, which will actually make them easier targets. Studied the tactical display. The young lieutenant was right. Transmit your analysis to Admiral. The battle began at extreme range. Human ships launched missiles that traveled for several minutes before reaching their targets. These weren't simple explosive warheads. They were intelligent weapons with their own targeting computers and the ability to adjust their approach based on enemy movements. Imperial point defense systems destroyed some missiles, but others got through. Explosions blossomed across several Imperial warships as damaged ships fell out of formation. Fleet Marshal watched with growing concern. The humans were fighting at distances his weapons couldn't reach. All ships increased speed, close to effective range. The Imperial fleet accelerated, charging forward in a massive wave meant to overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers. It looked impressive. It was also exactly what had expected. Launch fighters ordered. The 3 human carriers opened their launch bays. Hundreds of small, fast fighter craft erupted into space. Unlike Imperial fighters that relied on pilots, human fighters used a combination of human control and artificial intelligence. One pilot could coordinate an entire squadron, making split-second decisions, while the computers handled the actual flying. The fighters swept around the Imperial fleet's flanks, attacking vulnerable engines and weapon systems. Meanwhile, human battleships moved in coordinated groups, their fire synchronized by networked computers that allowed them to concentrate overwhelming force on single targets. Engineer monitored power distribution aboard the indomitable will as the battle intensified. Shield generators at 70% capacity. Weapons systems optimal. We can maintain this intensity for another 4 hours if needed. The battle raged for 6 hours. It was longer than any engagement in recent Imperial history, and the casualties reflected that. Human destroyers darted between larger ships, their smaller size making them harder to hit, while their weapons were just as deadly as anything the battleships carried. One human destroyer, the Resolute Dawn, took heavy fire while protecting a damaged battleship. Its shields failed, and plasma fire tore through its hull. The crew evacuated, but 17 people died when a section of the ship explosively decompressed. Doctor worked frantically in the medical bay as injured personnel were brought in. Burns from overloaded consoles, broken bones from being thrown against bulkheads during evasive maneuvers, and in one case, a severe concussion when a ceiling panel had broken loose. "We need more medical personnel," shouted to her assistant. They were overwhelmed with casualties, and the battle was still ongoing. On the Imperial side, the situation was far worse. 97 ships had been completely destroyed. Another 140 were too damaged to continue fighting. Fleet Marshal stared at his tactical display in disbelief. His carefully planned strategy had failed. The humans hadn't been overwhelmed. They had barely been scratched. "All ships retreat," finally ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. The remaining Imperial vessels turned and fled, leaving their damaged comrades behind. Human ships did not pursue. Instead, they began rescue operations, searching for survivors from both sides. This shocked the Imperial crews who had been captured or rescued. They expected execution or torture. Instead, they received medical treatment. Doctor worked on human and alien patients without distinction, treating injuries based on severity rather than species. One of the rescued officers was Captain, a career Imperial Navy man who had commanded one of the destroyers in his fleet. His ship had been cut in half by rail gun fire, and he had barely made it to an escape pod before the reactor exploded. Now he sat in the medical bay of the Horizon's Edge, his injuries treated, watching human doctors care for his crew members with the same attention they gave their own people. "Why?" asked Doctor through a translator. "Why save us after we attacked you?" Looked at the alien officer with tired eyes. She had been working for 8 hours straight without rest. "Because you're injured and we can help. That's all the reason we need." The answer seemed to confuse deeply. In Imperial culture, defeated enemies were either enslaved or executed. Mercy was seen as weakness. But these humans had just destroyed 97 warships, demonstrating overwhelming strength, and then showed mercy anyway. The contradiction was difficult to process. News of the battle spread through the Empire within hours. Emperor received the casualty reports in silence. Nearly 100 ships destroyed, thousands dead. The Empire's military reputation shattered. But more concerning than the military losses were the political consequences. 6 subject species had declared independence within hours of hearing about the battle. Border colonies were refusing to send tribute. Some imperial governors were negotiating privately with human representatives. The empire was fracturing. Senator met secretly with ambassador in neutral space. "There are those within the empire who want reform," she explained. "We control the core worlds and most of the Senate, but we lack military support. Warlord and his faction control most of the frontier fleets." Listened carefully. "What are you proposing?" "An alliance. Help us remove the warlords and establish a constitutional government. In exchange, we'll end the tribute system and offer true partnership to the subject species," said. "And what about the species that have already declared independence?" asked. "They remain free. We won't try to reclaim them. The old empire is dead. The question is what comes next. Before could respond, urgent news arrived. Warlord had seized control of several frontier fleets and declared himself protector of the realm. He was gathering ships for a massive strike, and intelligence suggested his target was Earth itself. The warlord had studied human behavior and reached a simple conclusion: cut off the head and the body dies. If he could destroy humanity's home world, the Terran Federation would collapse and the Imperial Order could be restored. Admiral received the intelligence with cold calculation. We need to split our forces. Part of the fleet will harass Advance, slow him down. The main force returns to Earth to prepare defenses. That's risky, Commander noted. We'll be fighting on multiple fronts. We don't have a choice. If reaches Earth with his full force, even our defenses might not hold, replied. She looked around at her senior officers. This is what we signed up for, protecting humanity whatever the cost. Lieutenant volunteered immediately for the harassment force. I can analyze their fleet movements better from a forward position. Engineer refused evacuation orders. My knowledge of captured Imperial technology could be vital. I'm staying. Doctor made her own difficult choice. She had formed relationships with several rescued Imperial officers, including Captain. They needed continued medical care, but Earth would need every doctor if fleet arrived. In the end, she chose to return to Earth, but she left detailed medical instructions with her assistants to continue treating the alien patients with the same care humans received. The human fleet split. 10 ships remained to harass Advance. The rest turned toward home, racing against time to prepare Earth's defenses for the largest battle in human history. Behind them, secretly following Armada, came Senator and the Imperial ships loyal to the Emperor. The future of the entire galactic sector would be decided in the space around humanity's home world. Emperor IV sat in his private chambers, staring at the holographic display that showed the current state of his empire. Red markers indicated systems in open rebellion. Yellow markers showed regions where local governors had stopped sending reports. Green markers, once covering the entire map, were now scattered and isolated. In just 3 weeks, 3,000 years of imperial authority had begun to crumble. The assassination attempt had come 2 days ago. A member of his own guard, bribed by someone in Warlord's faction, had tried to poison his evening meal. The plot had been discovered, but the message was clear. Even within the palace walls, the Emperor was no longer safe. Thought about his ancestors, the long line of rulers who had built the Empire into the dominant force in this region of space. They had been conquerors, warriors, and politicians. Now their descendants sat in a crumbling palace, watching everything fall apart because some unknown species called humans had arrived with better weapons and different ideas about how civilizations should interact. A message arrived from the frontier. Warlord had issued a proclamation declaring himself protector of the realm. He claimed the Emperor had grown weak, that the only way to preserve the Empire was through strength and military action. 6 frontier fleets had joined him. Others remained undecided. He's going to attack the human home world, Spymaster said, appearing from the shadows where he had been observing silently. Our intelligence indicates he's assembled over 600 warships. Can he win? Asked. Hesitated before answering. Possibly. The humans are spread out now, protecting multiple systems. If strikes quickly and decisively at their home world, he might succeed before they can concentrate their forces. But the cost will be enormous. And if he fails, then the Empire truly dies. We'll have nothing left to negotiate with. Made a decision that would have horrified his ancestors. Contact Senator. Tell her I'm authorizing her mission. If the only way to preserve some form of the Empire is to ally with its enemies against our own military, then that's what we'll do. Billions of kilometers away, on Earth, President addressed the Terran Council in an emergency session. The council chamber was built into the side of a mountain in what used to be called Korea, chosen centuries ago as the seat of human government because of its historical significance as a place where different peoples had learned to coexist. "We didn't go to the frontier sectors looking for war," President said to the assembled representatives. "We went looking for trade partners and new knowledge, but now war has found us anyway, and we must decide how to respond." Ambassador stood to present his report from the negotiations with Senator. "There's a faction within the empire that wants reform. They're offering alliance against the warlord faction in exchange for our help establishing a new government based on representation rather than conquest." "And we're supposed to trust them?" asked Representative Minu, a skeptical older man who had fought in the Mars Rebellion decades ago. "They've spent 3,000 years oppressing other species. Now they want our help because they're losing control." "They want our help because they see what happens when they fight us," replied. "This isn't about trust. It's about mutual interest. We can help create a reformed empire that respects its member species, or we can let the warlords maintain the old system through fear and military force." Fleet Admiral presented the military situation. "Warlord is coming with 600 ships. Our intelligence suggests he'll reach Earth in approximately 2 weeks. We have 73 military vessels currently in the Sol system, plus orbital defense platforms. We can win, but casualties will be severe." "Unless Senator's loyalist fleet joins the battle," President noted. "Correct. Her 200 ships would tip the balance significantly," confirmed. The council debated for hours. Some representatives argued that humanity should remain neutral in imperial politics. Others insisted that helping oppressed species was a moral obligation. Eventually, a vote was called. The decision was made. Humanity would accept the alliance with the imperial reformists. On the Indomitable Will, now part of the Forward Harassment Force, Lieutenant studied Warlord's fleet movements. The Warlord was pushing his ships hard, traveling at maximum sustainable speed toward human space. The 10 human vessels assigned to slow him down were conducting hit-and-run attacks, appearing from nowhere to destroy supply ships and isolated vessels before vanishing back into the vastness of space. "We've destroyed 15 of their support vessels," reported to Commander. "It's slowing them down, but not enough. They'll still reach Earth with most of their force intact." Studied the tactical display. "Then we need to be more aggressive. Target their fuel ships specifically. Force them to choose between speed and having enough fuel for combat when they arrive." It was dangerous work. The harassment force was vastly outnumbered, and one mistake could mean destruction. But they were buying time for Earth to prepare, and that made the risk worthwhile. Engineer had become invaluable during these operations. Her understanding of captured Imperial technology allowed the human ships to predict enemy movements and exploit weaknesses in their systems. "Their fleet formation leaves gaps in sensor coverage," explained during one mission briefing. "If we approach from specific angles, we can get much closer before they detect us." The harassment tactics were working, but they came at a cost. One human destroyer was caught by 3 Imperial cruisers and destroyed before it could retreat. 23 crew members died. Each casualty report reached Earth and reminded everyone what was at stake. Meanwhile, the had become an unexpected diplomatic asset. His species had officially declared independence from the Empire, and 6 other species had followed their example. They formed a loose coalition called the Free Species Assembly and represented them in negotiations with humanity. "We can offer 12 warships to help defend Earth," told Ambassador during a secure communication. "They're not as advanced as human vessels, but we can fight. Your people stood up for us. Now we stand up for you." The offer moved deeply. "Your people have just gained independence. You don't need to risk yourselves in our battle." "It's not just your battle," replied. If wins, he'll reconquer all of us. But if we win together, we prove that the old order is finished. We prove that there's a different way for species to interact. On the carrier Horizon's edge, Vice Admiral oversaw the return to Earth and the preparation of orbital defenses. The planet had powerful defense platforms, but they had never been tested in actual combat. Now they would face the largest alien armada ever assembled against humanity. Doctor had returned to Earth and immediately began organizing medical facilities. She knew that casualties would be enormous. Hospitals across the planet prepared for the worst, stockpiling medical supplies and training civilian doctors in treating combat injuries. In a moment of quiet, thought about Captain and the other Imperial officers she had treated. They had been enemies, but they had also been people, intelligent beings with families and hopes and fears. War made monsters of everyone if you weren't careful to remember that the people on the other side were people too. Senator's loyalist fleet departed from the Imperial core world secretly, traveling through unmonitored space routes to avoid detection by agents. She brought 200 ships and a message from Emperor authorizing cooperation with humanity. "This is treason according to our old laws," one of her captains noted. "Then we're writing new laws," replied. "The Empire survives or it dies based on what happens in the next few weeks. I'd rather be a traitor to a failed system than loyal to something that's destroying itself." As both fleets converged on Earth, the planet prepared. Civilians were evacuated from coastal areas in case the battle resulted in debris falling from orbit. Children watched the sky, seeing the defense platforms light up one by one as they powered their weapons. Everyone understood that something historic was about to happen. President gave an address to the entire planet, broadcast on every channel. "We've reached beyond our solar system and found a galaxy full of life. We've encountered species both friendly and hostile. We've discovered that the universe is vast and complex and often unfair. But we've also proven something important. Humanity's principles matter. Justice matters. The way we treat others matters. In the coming days, we'll face a test of those principles. We'll either prove that societies built on mutual respect can defend themselves, or we'll fall and become another cautionary tale about naive idealism. I believe in us. I believe in our military. And I believe that when this is over, we'll have changed this region of space for the better." In the forward harassment force, Lieutenant sent his final report before falling back to Earth. "Enemy fleet will arrive in 48 hours. They've sustained moderate damage from our attacks but remain combat effective. Estimated force, 570 vessels." Commander read the report and added his own note. "All harassment force vessels are falling back to Earth for the final battle. We've done everything we can to slow them down. The rest is up to the defenders." The Indomitable will turn toward home, joining the other harassment vessels on the long journey back. They had bought Earth precious time. Now they would see if it was enough. On Earth, in the military command center buried deep underground, Admiral reviewed the defensive positions one last time. 73 human warships, 12 vessels from the Free Species Assembly, 50 orbital defense platforms, 200 Imperial Loyalist ships that were supposed to arrive but might not make it in time. Against them, 570 warships led by a warlord who believed the only way to preserve his civilization was to destroy humanity's. "It's going to be close," said to her staff. "We've faced worse odds before," Admiral replied, though both of them knew that was a lie. Humanity had never faced anything like this. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds belonging to hundreds of species, people watched and waited. The battle approaching Earth wasn't just about human survival. It was about whether strength alone determined the future, or whether there was room in the galaxy for societies built on different principles. In the capital, Emperor watched the same sensor displays that everyone else was watching. He had bet everything on reform and alliance with former enemies. If Senator and the humans lost, his empire would be taken over by warlords who would never forgive his perceived betrayal. But if they won, maybe something new could be built from the ruins of the old order. Maybe his empire could transform into something his ancestors would never recognize, but which might actually be worth preserving. The countdown began. 48 hours until Warlord's fleet arrived at Earth. 48 hours until everything changed. The alarm systems throughout Earth's orbital defense network activated simultaneously, their warnings heard by billions of people across the planet. Every screen, every communication device, every emergency broadcast system carried the same message. The enemy fleet had arrived. Warlord stood on the bridge of his flagship Vengeance of Empire, watching Earth grow larger in his. The blue and green planet looked peaceful, unaware of the destruction he was about to deliver. He had studied human history during the journey, learning about their wars and their weaknesses. They were sentimental creatures who cared too much about individual lives. That sentimentality would be their downfall. 600 warships, announced to his crew. The largest armada ever assembled by the Empire. Today we end the human threat and restore our rightful dominance over this sector. He opened a communication channel aimed at Earth. I am Warlord, Protector of the Realm. You have 48 minutes to surrender unconditionally. Power down your defenses, evacuate your military vessels, and prepare to accept Imperial authority. Refuse, and your world burns. On Earth, in the underground command center, Vice Admiral listened to the ultimatum without expression. Around her, dozens of officers monitored defensive systems, fleet positions, and incoming threats. The weight of defending humanity's home world rested on her shoulders. All ships battle stations, transmitted calmly. This is not a drill. We defend Earth. We defend everything we've built. And we show them that humanity doesn't break. The human defensive fleet, 73 ships strong, moved into carefully planned positions. Commander aboard the indomitable Will took the central position, his battleship's proven combat record making it the natural anchor for the defensive line. And the 12 ships from the Free Species Assembly positioned themselves near Earth's moon, ready to protect the defense platforms stationed there. The captain had insisted on being part of the front line, despite his vessels being older and less powerful than human ships. Your people saved us, had said when Admiral suggested a safer position. Now we help save you. But the biggest question remained. Where was Senator? Her 200 loyalist ships were supposed to arrive before the battle began, but long-range sensors showed no sign of them. Either they had been delayed or they weren't coming at all. The timer reached 0. Warlord's fleet began its attack. 600 warships advanced in a massive formation that filled orbital space. Their plasma weapons charged, missiles armed, and fighters launched. It was a display of military might meant to overwhelm through sheer scale. Lieutenant sat at his tactical station aboard the indomitable Will, his hands moving across controls with practiced speed. Enemy fleet advancing in 3 waves. First wave, 200 ships. Second wave, 200 ships. Reserve force, 200 ships held back. He's being cautious, Commander noted. Probably learned from Fleet Marshal's defeat. He's testing our defenses before committing everything. Then we make him pay for every meter of space, transmitted to all defending ships. The battle began at extreme range. Human ships launched their long-range missiles, the same weapons that had proven so effective in previous engagements. Hundreds of intelligent missiles streaked through space, adjusting their paths as they approached their targets. His fleet had prepared for this. Their point defense systems were coordinated better than in previous battles, destroying many missiles before they could reach their targets. But not all. Explosions blossomed across the first wave as dozens of missiles found their marks. The Imperial fleet returned fire. Plasma bolts by the thousands lit up space. The defending human ship's shields flared under the assault, energy barriers straining to absorb the incoming damage. Engineer monitored the Indomitable will power systems as shield generators worked at maximum capacity. Shields at 85%. We can maintain this for approximately 3 hours before we need to rotate back for recharge. The orbital defense platforms added their firepower to the battle. Massive rail guns mounted on the platforms fired solid projectile after solid projectile, each shot powerful enough to punch through an Imperial warship's armor. The platforms couldn't move, but they didn't need to. They were positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that protected Earth's orbital space. The first hour of battle was brutal. The human destroyer Defiant Spirit took concentrated fire from 5 Imperial cruisers. Its shields collapsed, and plasma bolts tore through its hull. The crew evacuated in escape pods, but 19 people died when the reactor section exploded. 2 Imperial warships collided during evasive maneuvers, their crews unprepared for the intensity of human defensive fire. Both vessels tumbled out of control, leaking atmosphere and debris. Free Species assembly ships fought with desperate courage. Their weapons were older and less powerful, but they used their knowledge of Imperial tactics to exploit weaknesses. One cruiser deliberately rammed an Imperial destroyer that had penetrated too close to Earth, sacrificing itself to take out the enemy vessel. On Earth's surface, Doctor worked in a hospital that had been converted into a military medical facility. The first casualties were arriving: crew members from damaged ships, injured personnel from the defense platforms, and civilians hurt in one area where debris had fallen through the atmosphere. "We need more surgical teams," shouted, her hands covered in the blue blood of an alien pilot from one of ships. She worked without pause, moving from one patient to another, human and alien treated with equal urgency. The battle entered its second hour. Warlord committed his second wave, doubling the pressure on Earth's defenders. 2 more human destroyers were destroyed. An orbital defense platform was overwhelmed and went dark, its crew dead. But the defending fleet held. Commander coordinated defensive positions, moving ships to cover gaps and concentrating fire on Imperial vessels that penetrated too deep into the defensive lines. Lieutenant identified patterns in the Imperial attack. "Commander, they're setting up for a breakthrough attempt on our left flank. If they succeed, they'll have a clear path to the defense platforms protecting Europe and Africa." "Not happening," replied. He transmitted coordinates to 5 nearby ships. "All vessels converge on the marked position. We stop them here." The Indomitable will and 4 destroyers moved to intercept the Imperial breakthrough attempt. Rail guns fired in synchronized patterns, creating a wall of metal projectiles that no ship could survive passing through. 15 Imperial warships tried anyway. None made it through. But the cost was mounting. Human ammunition supplies were depleting. Shield generators were overheating. Crews were exhausted from hours of constant combat, and Warlord still had 200 fresh ships in reserve. On the Vengeance of Empire watched the battle with growing frustration. He had expected the humans to break by now. Instead, they fought with a coordination and determination that reminded him of the old Imperial military before generations of easy conquests had made them soft. "Commit the reserves," ordered. "All ships full assault, sweep them aside." The reserve force of 200 warships accelerated forward, adding their weapons to the battle. Now Earth's defenders faced 600 ships simultaneously, and the defensive line began to crack. An entire section of orbital platforms was destroyed in a concentrated barrage. 3 human destroyers were overwhelmed and destroyed within minutes of each other. A Free Species assembly frigate took a direct hit and broke apart, all hands lost. Vice Admiral watched the tactical display with cold calculation. They couldn't hold much longer. The reserves were gone. Ammunition was critical. Shield generators were failing across the fleet. "All ships prepare to fall back to Earth orbit," transmitted. We'll make them come through the atmosphere if we have to. It was the last line of defense. If fleet entered Earth's atmosphere, the battle would devastate the surface, but at least the defenders would have the advantage of planetary defenses, and the enemy would suffer massive losses from atmospheric entry. Then something impossible happened. Long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature. 200 ships emerged from faster-than-light travel on its flank. Senator and the Imperial Loyalist fleet had arrived. "This is Senator to all defending forces," the transmission came through. "We stand with Earth. We stand for reform. We stand against tyranny." The Loyalist fleet opened fire on its forces from behind. The warlord ships found themselves caught between two forces, unable to concentrate on either without exposing themselves to the other. "Traitor!" screamed at the screen displaying its image. "You betray 3,000 years of Imperial history." "I preserve what's worth preserving and abandon what deserves to die," replied calmly. The battle transformed. Human ships, given a moment to recover, renewed their assault. Lieutenant worked with Imperial Loyalist tactical officers through translated communications, coordinating attacks despite language barriers and different tactical systems. "The enemy flagship is attempting to break through toward Earth," transmitted on all frequencies. "All available ships intercept." The Indomitable will turn toward vengeance of Empire. Commander had fought ideology through 2 major battles already. Now he would end it. The 2 flagships closed on each other, weapons firing continuously. Rail gun rounds and plasma bolts crossed paths. Shields strained and failed. Both ships took devastating damage. "Shields down to 15%, engineer reported. "Hull breaches on decks 5 and 6. Fire control systems damaged." "Keep firing," ordered. "We end this." The Indomitable will and vengeance of Empire passed within 300 meters of each other, exchanging point-blank fire. The Imperial flagship's shields collapsed. Rail gun rounds tore through its hull, destroying engines and weapon systems. But the human battleship wasn't unscathed. A plasma bolt penetrated the failing shields and struck the bridge directly. The explosion threw against a bulkhead. Emergency systems engaged as atmosphere began venting. "All hands abandon ship," transmitted as he struggled to his feet. "This is Commander. Get to the escape pods now." Lieutenant helped his commander toward the exit. "Sir, we need to go." The crew evacuated in organized chaos, training overcoming panic. Engineers made sure everyone in her section reached the escape pods before heading to one herself. As the last pod ejected, the Indomitable will used its remaining power to fire one final salvo at the vengeance of Empire. The Imperial flagship exploded, taking Warlord with it. The human battleship, crippled and dying, drifted through space as small explosions continued across its hull. It had served through 2 months of combat, survived 3 major battles, and in its final moments had killed the enemy commander threatening Earth. An Imperial Loyalist frigate picked up the Indomitable will's escape pods, rescuing Commander and his surviving crew. It was a strange moment, former enemies working together to save lives. With Dead and his flagship destroyed, the remaining Imperial ships lost cohesion. Some tried to fight on, but most began retreating. The Loyalist fleet pursued, accepting surrenders and destroying those who refused to stand down. The battle for Earth lasted 6 hours. Human losses: 28 ships destroyed, 40,000 dead. Free Species Assembly: 4 ships lost, 3,000 casualties. Imperial Loyalist forces: 73 ships destroyed, unknown casualties. But Earth survived, and more importantly, a precedent had been set. Humans and aliens had fought together against tyranny. On Earth's surface, Doctor finally allowed herself to rest after working for 30 consecutive hours. She had saved countless lives, human and alien. She had also watched people die despite her best efforts. War had a cost that no amount of victory could erase. 6 months later, representatives from 47 species gathered on Earth for the official formation of the Free Sector Alliance. Emperor IV, now ruling a reformed constitutional empire, signed the charter alongside President and representing the independent species. Commander, promoted to Admiral, addressed the gathering. 6 months ago, one human battleship entered this sector seeking peaceful contact. What we found was an empire built on conquest and a galaxy full of species waiting for things to change. We didn't set out to be liberators or conquerors. We just refused to accept that might makes right. And because we stood up for that principle, everything changed. Lieutenant and engineer, both decorated for their actions during the war, received new assignments training joint human-alien task forces. The cultural barriers were enormous, but slowly they were building something new. Doctor established the first medical academy, teaching both human and alien doctors how to treat species different from their own. Captain, the imperial officer she had saved during the second battle, became one of her first students, having left the military to pursue medicine. A memorial was built in Earth orbit, near where the battle for Earth had been fiercest. It listed names of the fallen from all sides, human and alien. The inscription read, "They fell so that others might choose their own path among the stars." 1 year after the indomitable Will first entered Imperial space, stood at Earth's spaceport with his daughter, who had been accepted into a human engineering university. She was the first to study on Earth, but she wouldn't be the last. "Once we cowered before empires," said, watching ships from dozens of species arrive and depart. "Now we stand beside humans, not as servants to masters, but as partners in freedom. That is the shockwave that will reshape the stars." On the frontier, joint exploration teams from the Alliance and Reformed Empire worked together, mapping unknown regions. They detected signals from another galactic sector, suggesting vast civilizations beyond current borders. The age of isolation had ended. Humanity and its new allies faced the unknown together, not as conquerors but as explorers seeking to build something better than what had come before. And somewhere in deep space, construction crews were building a new battleship. It would be named Indomitable Will II, in honor of the ship that had changed everything. Commander, now Admiral, would command it when it launched. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in 3,000 years, this region of space faced that uncertainty with hope instead of fear.